Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte goët.
She's been treated like a Faberge egg by all of us, beginning with me and the president. He's pointing out factual inconsistencies. Do you have corroboration for her claims? Have you found, can you fill in her memory gaps, her factual inconsistencies? That is part of the evidence gathering process in any hunt for truth.
And you know, Mika, while we're talking about Democratic coalitions, Barack Obama, can you imagine if Barack Obama were on the scene as an active politician, how he would be responding to that? His coalitions from 2008 and 2012 responded to that sort of abhorrent behavior. And I think he was the only Democrat to get reelected with a majority of the vote since FDR. Democrats have to find somebody that is a voice of the opposition that can speak out against that outrage. Tell me, what were your thoughts as you saw Kellyanne and Sarah Huckabee Sanders basically defend the president?
Well, the president was reprehensible. Christine Blasey Ford has put herself out there, and she has been enduring the blinding light of questions surrounding her life, her credibility, and her story. And I was really struck by Kellyanne Conway saying that she's been treated like a Faberge egg. That's really interesting. I find that fascinating, actually, because Kellyanne Conway went on a Sunday show, and in the middle of making her point, she announced that she is a victim of sexual assault. Really? Oh my gosh, okay. Well, women should be heard, and apparently they get treated like Faberge eggs. So tell us your story. Who's your attacker? Who broke the law? Who hurt you? You seemed really uncomfortable when you let that slip out. Your voice got small. Your voice cracked. You had to clear your throat. You were really uncomfortable just saying, I am a victim of sexual assault. And you know what? I say that as a victim of sexual assault myself. So I want to ask, why can't you be the egg, Kellyanne, the Faberge egg, and tell your story? Because you say women should be heard. You talk out of both sides of your mouth. You say that women should be heard, their stories are believable or credible and understanding and compelling. Well, let's hear yours. That's very convenient to drop that, but I want to know your story. I want to know what happened. You should have justice. Well, shouldn't you? No, hold on. I'm not done.
No, I
know your value, okay? You can't just throw that out as a political dagger to protect this reprehensible predator of a president and make an announcement that you're the victim of the sexual assault, which therefore, for some reason, makes everybody not ask you about it. If women are being treated like Faberge eggs when they announce their stories, then you go ahead and tell yours and see how easy it is. Okay? That was as low as it gets. I would get up and leave if I were you today. I would never want to face the cameras again unless you're willing to tell your story, just like Dr. Ford did. Okay? And see what it feels like to be treated like a Faberge egg, as you say. You have such great, quick, tight little points that you want to just throw out there. This one's not going to fly. You can't use being a victim of sexual assault, throw it out there, and then literally sully the name of someone who has stepped in front of the cameras before the United States of America and told her story. And you say that she's being treated like a Faberge egg. That's just delicious at this point. You know, the president, we get him. But Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Kellyanne Conway, I would just like to say, you two are single-handedly setting back women.
It is Friday, the 5th of October of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. And our daily special is not to convince you that you should only have a liquid diet today. No. Indeed, we have some tasty morsels in which you can, absorb the alcohol, as we used to say when maybe I overconsumed a little bit of alcohol here and there with a few of my peers. Jeez. You know, it is true. You may not be able to choose your family, but when you choose your peers, you better be damn lucky. I had the great fortune to have peers consistently through my life and in various places where we moved. The people I tended to gravitate to or gravitate towards me, or maybe just luck of the draw, and maybe it was the guidance of Providence. Who knows? But I had the great fortune that my friends pretty much, they like to, they like to party, but they were also on the straight and narrow. They never wanted to hurt other people. They only wanted to help other people. And they were appalled when other people hurt other people. And so my friends, I don't know, maybe it was a little bit of misdirection. Maybe we were still fulfilling the construct of toxic masculinity. But we did consciously decide that we weren't going to bully the bullies, but we would make sure that the bullies would never bully again. And I guess that meant that, you had to physically intrude upon a situation, shall we say. And, but we didn't do it because we liked the power trip of it. We only did it because you can't live in a neighborhood where a bully is bullying all the little kids. You can't have it. Cannot have it. And if, heaven forbid, someone mistreated our sister, heaven forbid for that person. And I will say, then, the extension of that toxic masculinity, you know what that does? Yeah, I'll tell you what that does. Because our sisters might have been a tad afraid to come forward with their stories of sexual abuse at the hands of, the guys. Because we, in their fearful, constructed mind themselves, thought that we would go to jail for, the physicality we might perpetrate upon the perpetrator. And so they shut up because they didn't want their brother to suffer. Can you believe that? This is what we've taught our women to do. So I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry for, even in our quest to stand up for women, we still made women shut up. And it might have been because of the way we acted. So Mika Brzezinski dared Kellyanne Conway to be the Faberge Egg and see what it's like for once. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Oh yeah, the French 77 is ready to pour. All right. I promise you, this maudlin rant is not perpetrated by the French 77. We're before that. Wait until the French 77 kicks in. Well, on the rest of the menu, Devin Nunes sent a glossy 40-page mailer fashioned to look like a magazine to attack his hometown paper for printing fake news. He attacks the Fresno Bee with something that looks like a magazine. Jesus. Fake news. Now that's projection, isn't it? Russian spies are accused of targeting the chemical weapons watchdog. And why wouldn't they? I mean, it's not just the chemical weapons watchdog. It's also the anti-doping commission. You know, what's up with that? Well, we know there's some big sporting events coming up. And there's some big sporting events that just ended. Jesus. And by wholeheartedly embracing the role as the gravedigger of democracy, Mitch McConnell is America's own little Paul von Hindenburg. Yes, he is. Tearing it all apart. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the Trump White House was caught hiding facts about children's health again. I might add. And following last week's massive hack, Facebook's fortunes go from bad to worse. And that might be good. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Would please go to our homepage at netrootsradio.com. When the page loads, you will notice a lovely scroll. And I should add that really the whole page is lovely. And thank you, Tom, for that. You will notice that scroll that I mentioned. Those are links to determine if you are registered to vote and also to register to vote. Please hurry up. It's probably too late in some areas, but just do it, okay? We got to overwhelm them. We have to. It's important. The midterms. Can you believe that we're going to vote in the midterms? Jeez. You'd almost think we were getting old and, have time on our hands. Yikes. No, it's not that we have time on our hands, but we would like to. And if we don't vote, the time on our hands will be what history might look back upon as being, the bad times. So please go vote. Okay, so then scroll down to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. The chat room link is on the rightish of the page, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. She's actually working, but she does monitor the chat room quite diligently. But there is always someone there that can help you if you have a question or you just want to engage. That's a good thing. Check out Kelly's shows on Saturday at the Table with Kelly Lincoln, 3 p.m. on the West Coast, 6 p.m. on the East Coast, and then later she teams up with Ricky for the Roundtable Roundhouse Power Hour, and they command that hour beginning at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast. And I got to tell you, it is a power hour. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the contribute button. And please, please, please become a Patreon of Netroots Radio. I hate saying this, but we are in somewhat dire need, and we are unable to do this without you. And, so costs go up, and for some reason what we take in goes down, and that's not good. Oh, I know that times are tough, and people have to put priorities on where their monies go, especially, when we have to overwhelm them with numbers in the voting booth. And also in the campaign coffers. It just has to be done. So I understand. But if you have a little left over, even like a cup of coffee a month, if you can afford to buy us that, please do, because then the monitor, the modem, I should say, those lights on that will continue to blink in their proper order, and that means the bills are being paid. Yay! Okay, so follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. We're over there on Facebook and a lot of other social media platforms like Tumblr and whatnot, so check us out. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And, of course, I can be found on Daily Co's as Justice Putnam. You can also follow the show on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at CookbookWest. And pick up podcasts of the show by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, iTunes, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. Okay, it's Friday. We could make it an Anything Goes Friday, but no, we've made a curated show for you because that's what we do, We don't just throw it out there and say, make it yourself. No, we have curated these stories for your mental dining enjoyment. Indeed. So, better get on with this Devin Nunes story. I just love how they project. They're so funny. They think that, we don't see their lack of self-awareness. Tommy Christopher from Share Blue Media brings us this. And so Nunes took a page from the Trump playbook by sending a glossy for 40 pages of a mailer made to look like a slick magazine. Isn't that odd? Here, you can just sit on the commode, the toilet, whatever you call it, and read to your heart's content. Oh, yeah. Well, he's taken on the Fresno Bee, okay? And that he attacks as being a propaganda machine and takes issue with the paper for such offenses as reporting on activists protesting at Nunes' office, writing stories about the winery that Nunes co-owns and uses to pass himself off as a farmer, and, well, other examples of just basic journalism. It's a propaganda machine. Who, what, where, why, how? That's propaganda, buddy. The mailer also attacks a paper for covering a strange incident in which Nunes' uncle called law enforcement on a video crew shooting an ad for Nunes' challenger, Andrew Jans, even though the Jans campaign had written permission to be there where they were filming. But that doesn't stop, members of Nunes' family who are left there. There's not very many. Most of them hightailed it out to Iowa. Jeez. Why stick around in Fresno when you got, Devin Nunes as your relative? You want to get away as far as possible, but they're really, they're doing God's work there too, of course, This is not the first time Nunes has gone after the Bee. Earlier this year, he had a meltdown when a Bee reporter asked him if he planned to hold any open forums in the district, which he has not done since 2010. I guess he just doesn't have the temperament. Are you going to have a town hall? And the guy just attacked the reporter in the most. If they had been in, I got to tell you, Fresno is not known for having high rises. Okay. But if there had been a high rise, he probably would have tried to break the reporter like a little boy and drop him over the railing into the lobby 7 to 12 stories below. Yeah. A few months later, Nunes put out an ad falsely accusing the paper, the Fresno Bee, of working with radical left-wing groups to produce fake news stories. This is in the fake magazine that Devin Nunes mailed out to constituents in, the Sacramento Valley area that Fresno is. But as Fresno Bee editor Joe Chieta pointed out recently, the paper has endorsed Nunes 8 times. So which is it, Devin? Was it fake news when they endorsed you, or is it fake news now that they're not? We did not change here. He has, Chieta told KVPR Radio in response to the mailer. Indeed, Nunes has made an art form of avoiding his constituents. Recently, he has taken to holding invitation-only events at which guests may be subject to searches. Ooh. And must provide a raft of personal information before they can even learn an event's location, because it's national security wherever Devin goes. And once he is surrounded by those carefully selected guests, Nunes spends his time slamming the residents of his own state and district as fruits and nuts who believe in goofy stuff like protecting the environment. Yeah. Why are they rats? Why is Devin Nunes a rat? Because they poop where they eat. Perhaps the biggest change since the paper endorsed Nunes in 2016 is his relentless campaign to shield Trump from the Russia investigation. Of course. Well, we know all about what he's done and why he's tried to oust Stein, promoting wild conspiracy theories. In fact, Trump was out this morning, going off on some wacko conspiracy theory about Soros paying crisis actors to yell at the elevators full of GOP saints. No, Devin and Donnie, that's what you do. You have to pay actors to do what you need to have done. Don't think everyone does it. Barnes from Think Progress brings us this next offering here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's Bistro Cafe, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. It looks like Russian spies have been in the Netherlands, the UK, and the U.S. And intelligence agencies in those nations have exposed GRU agents and their broader campaign. Russia's military intelligence service, the GRU, was accused by Western governments of attempting to mount a brazen series of malicious cyber attacks against targets around the world, including the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons and the World Anti-Doping Agency. It was revealed yesterday that officers from the Dutch Military Intelligence Service had foiled an attempt by 4 GRU agents to launch a cyber attack against the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, also known by its moniker, the OPCW. The incident had occurred in April, just weeks after the attempted assassination of Sergei Skripal in the UK, which the OCPW was helping to investigate. The GRU agents traveled to the Netherlands under Russian diplomatic passports after an initial attempt to launch a remote cyber attack on the OCPW failed. The agents then headed to the Russian embassy and, after 2 days of reconnaissance, hired a car and parked near the OCPW building. At this point, Dutch intelligence officers intervened and promptly kicked the 4 out of the country. Did they do it with their wooden shoes? I would have. Dutch intelligence did, however, retain the equipment the GRU agents were using in the attempted hack, including a laptop, which showed evidence of similar operations in Switzerland and Malaysia. Well. Okay, just hours before the 4 men were arrested, the UK, backed by intel from Australia and New Zealand, accused the GRU of launching a worldwide campaign of malicious cyber attacks, including an attack on the airport in Odessa in the Ukraine in 2017, as well as the release of confidential files stolen from the World Anti-Doping Agency in 2016. Meanwhile, the same day, the U.S. Justice Department announced indictments against 7 GRU officers for hacking, wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. The 3 of the hackers were also accused of helping to hack individuals in the U.S. during the 2016 presidential election, while 4 of the names on the indictment were the same names as those apprehended in The Hague for trying to disrupt the OPCW. The extent of the details released about the GRU's activities is unprecedented. Dutch authorities publicly posted not only the agents' names and passports, but also photographic evidence of their equipment, which included mobile phones, cameras, a Wi-Fi panel antenna, and stacks of U.S. dollars. Of Alternate helps us finish up this part of our repast here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, that being here in the Bistro Cafe, because we still have the chef's table coming up. In a new piece for the New York Review of Books, historian Christopher Browning warns that there are troubling parallels between the present-day United States and the days of fascism's rise in Europe. Browning, a specialist in the areas of the Holocaust, Nazi Germany, and World War-era Europe, isn't arguing that Donald Trump is a modern-day Adolf Hitler or that Trumpism is akin to Nazism. But he does argue that certain stress fractures in the society and the international order appear to be re-emerging, and that these patterns portend troubling trends for the U.S. and the rest of the world. And there is one figure in American politics that Browning does see as a relatively direct and troubling analog to a crucial World War-era figure. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the Kentucky Republican, is becoming, quote, the gravedigger of American democracy, Browning wrote. A role played for Germany beginning in the 1930s by President Paul von Hindenburg. Hindenburg didn't defend democracy in Germany. Instead, he unleashed emergency powers in 1930 to appoint chancellors to skirt over political divisions in Parliament. Eventually, Hitler became chancellor when Hindenburg erroneously thought he could be controlled. Now, McConnell shows a similar disregard for democracy and likewise opens up the country to serious risk. As Browning explained, he stoked the hyperpolarization of American politics to make the Obama presidency as dysfunctional and paralyzed as he possibly could. As with parliamentary gridlock in the Weimar Republic, congressional gridlock in the U.S. has diminished respect for democratic norms, allowing McConnell to trample them even more. Nowhere is this vicious circle clearer than in the obliteration of traditional precedents concerning judicial appointments. Systemic obstruction of nominations in Obama's first term provoked Democrats to scrap the filibuster for all but Supreme Court nominations. Then, McConnell's unprecedented blocking of the Merrick Garland nomination required him to turn to scrap the filibuster for Supreme Court nominations in order to complete the steal of Scalia's seat and confirm Gorsuch. The extreme politicization of the judicial nomination process is once again on display in the current Kavanaugh hearings. And as a result, McConnell's strong-arm tactics, Browning argued. It will now be impossible for a president to make significant judicial appointments, including to the Supreme Court, unless the Senate is led by the same party. And that dynamic will push the country toward greater dysfunction. Most ominously, Browning warns that the detrimental effects of figures like McConnell and Trump will last for a long time. However long they stay in power, they will eventually leave, but the damage done to democracy and American institutions may persist for generations. Why don't we take a little break, all right, and we'll come back and we'll go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, doing more. Donald Trump has the role and the powers of the President of the United States of America. He either doesn't know what those are or doesn't care, maneuvering instead to be the type of rapacious, unimpeachable, despotic strongman that our country has claimed to oppose for the last 70 years. If that scares you, then congratulations. You have at least a passing interest in living in a democracy, and you should never listen to an evening talk show host skewer Trump again. Instead, you should watch Michael Moore's latest piece of gonzo documentary activism, Fahrenheit 11/9. Michael Moore makes documentaries like Protesters Make Signs, championing the people who think they are the consumers in our corporate, mercantile, militaristic society, but who are, more often than not, the consumed. This film finds Moore talking with working-class blacks and whites who've been mangled by Republicans and abandoned by Democrats, and who now stand to be devastated by Trump and his ilk. These examinations take him back to his hometown, Flint, Michigan. Yeah, that Flint. To look at how Michigan's former CEO Governor Rick Snyder has poisoned one of his cities. But Moore also spends time with Parkland High School gun control activists. He spends time with the new grassroots Democratic candidates who are challenging the party elite. Because where there's a similar appeal to a Moore movie and a Colbert monologue, there's an important difference. They're both funny. Moore likes to laugh just as much as you do. Moore still has his signature theatrical activist turns aimed at the people who are used to unimpeachably dishing it out, but Moore is not out to sell network ad dollars. He doesn't want you calm down and ready to buy something. He wants to show you that you can fight back, even if it's with a movie camera. Fahrenheit 11/9 shows how we got here, but more importantly, shows it's possible to get up and get out there. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. The Allagash Brewing Company in Maine makes a lot of bottle-conditioned beers. Those are brews that get their carbonation by fermenting a second time in the bottle, as yeast belch out CO2.
And because they do a lot of bottle conditioning, they're very meticulous about monitoring package pressures. It's a way for them to follow the progression of this re-fermentation in the bottle.
Thomas Shellhammer is a brewing scientist at Oregon State University who freely acknowledges
it's a fun job, science and beer.
Anyway, not long ago, Allagash noticed some very high pressures in some of their bottles. Not quite exploding, but alarming enough for them to give Shellhammer a call. What he and his colleague Kaylin Kirkpatrick found was that hops, the bittering agent in beers, might be to blame, because the aromatic flowers contain enzymes that can chew up starch. Now, typically when hop flowers are added during the initial cooking of the fermentable brew, those key enzymes are denatured, and thus the flower's only role is as a flavoring agent. But as the demand for hoppy beers has grown, brewers are looking for more tricks to get those juicy, fruity, herbal aromas into their beers. So they've been doing what's called dry hopping, dumping loads of hops into the beer during or after fermentation, rather than during the initial boil.
So there's sort of an upward limit as to how much hops you would want to put in the kettle because the beers just get unpalatably bitter. But if a brewer avoids that and focuses heavily on dry hopping, they can put very large amounts of hops into beer to create intense hoppy flavors.
Problem is, adding hops late doesn't deactivate their starch-attacking enzymes, and they're able to break down starches the yeasts weren't able to tackle, unleashing even more sugar into the brew. And if yeast are still hanging out, as in Allagash's bottle-conditioned beers, that kickstarts additional fermentation, and that boosts alcohol by volume and carbon dioxide concentration to potentially explosive levels.
Basically, the hops are taking something that is considered by brewers as being unfermentable and breaking them down to the point that they can actually re-ferment or become fermentable, or potentially contribute to sweetness in beer as beer ages.
The full detective story is in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry. And in case you're wondering, Shellhammer's palate does align with his academic interests.
I'm kind of intrigued by the hazy, juicy IPA thing that's going on right now. I'm also a fan of sort of traditional, old school IPAs.
He's the rare professor whose students use IPAs to raise their GPAs. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Heart disease and stroke can be catastrophic. They're leading causes of death, disability, and healthcare spending in the U.S., yet they're largely preventable. Alarmingly, heart disease and stroke are taking a toll on middle-aged adults 35 to 64, with over 800,000 deaths and hospitalizations in 2016. Million Hearts is a national initiative focused on preventing 1 million heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular events by 2022. Coordinated actions by Million Hearts partners in communities, healthcare, and public health will keep people healthy, optimize care, and improve outcomes in populations at risk. Everyone has a part to play. Focus on the ABCs of heart health. A. Aspirin use when appropriate. B. Blood pressure control. C. Cholesterol management. And S. Smoking cessation. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Take a guess. How many people in Florida can't vote because of a felony conviction? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In Florida, a person with a felony cannot vote after his or her conviction unless that right is reinstated specifically by the governor. This is also the case in Iowa, Kentucky, and Virginia. Nationwide, some 6 million people are disenfranchised because of these voting restrictions. In Florida alone, 1.4 million people, 10% of the state's adult population, can't vote because of a felony conviction, no matter how long ago or how minor. This November, There's a proposed amendment to the state constitution on the ballot, question 4, that would allow a person convicted of a felony to vote after successfully completing all the terms of a criminal sentence, including parole or probation. Passage is not guaranteed. It will take 60% of the vote in Florida for this provision to pass. And this is a modest proposal. It excludes classes of former prisoners from its coverage, which it shouldn't. Why would we ever want to keep someone who has fully paid the price for his or her crime and wants to re-engage in civic participation by voting from doing so? Really, give me one legitimate reason. The silence is deafening. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is the Radio Labour Report. I'm C. Marie Ainsborough. One of the largest and the most powerful labor federations in Africa has, for the first time in its history, elected a woman as president. At its recent national convention, COSATU, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, elected Zingizwa Losi as the federation's top elected leader. At the same time, the 2,000 delegates attending the convention in Johannesburg voted to have a 50-50 gender parity in the federation's executive. COSATU is South Africa's largest labor federation, with 21 affiliated unions. Ms. Losi becomes president after many years as an activist in the powerful National Union of Metalworkers, NUMSA. She left NUMSA when the union withdrew from COSATU in 2014.
COSATU is communicating a clear message for the world and the country to know that women within the ranks of this radical trade union movement are ready to take the responsibility at the sharpest end of the struggles of emancipation of all women in our society. We're gearing ourselves, comrades, to occupy the front ranks and cold face as the organized and class consciousness detachment of the broader working class women, which is the primary motive force of the women's emancipation struggle. We must strengthen and advance women's struggles at the workplace, in our communities, and in the broader political terrain. Practical and active involvement in struggles is itself part of the emancipatory process. Comrades, delegates, this should not be an isolated achievement, but part of our sustained and conscious efforts of broadening active participation of women at all levels of our unions. It is not an exaggeration to say that this class consciousness detachment of organized workers in South Africa in the fold of COSATU is once again making history and opening a new chapter that will go down in our proud historical annals of trade union women leadership. Comrades, we are inspired by our glorious past, and so we are saying, let's go back to the basics in order to strengthen our foundation, but also to build a radical trade union movement of the future. In these rapidly changing conditions and terrain of struggle today, comrades, in this changing world of work and global capitalism of the approaching age of the fourth industrial revolution, the organized workers of our country are facing the real catastrophe of job losses if they remained weak and divided as they are. Unity is our clarion call. And as COSATU, we are proudly of Marxism, Leninism, and NDR as our theoretical and strategic guide to action. Therefore, comrades, in our theory and practice, we must remain steadfast in proclaiming the call of the Communist Manifesto, and I quote, "Workers of the world, unite."
Ms. Losi will lead COSATU along with newly re-elected General Secretary Becky Nchala Nchali. I'm C. Marie Ainsborough. Thank you for listening.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your world in 2 minutes. Thousands of civilians across the Indonesian island of Sulawesi remain in need of humanitarian aid some 6 days after an earthquake and tsunami ravaged the island and inflicted widespread damage. The death toll from the disaster currently stands at nearly 1,600 people, but officials caution it's still a preliminary figure.
That is a number that we fear will rise, because there are still areas that have not been fully assessed, and there's a lot of rubble to go through.
Jens Lerke is a spokesperson for the UN's humanitarian office in Geneva and says survivors of last Friday's disaster are also in peril, including hundreds injured who have yet to receive any medical attention.
We have at least 17,000 people who have been rendered homeless. They have been displaced, their houses have been damaged or destroyed, and many of them, thousands of them, are sleeping in the open. They need food to eat, they need clean drinking water, and also, critically, they need psychosocial support because many of them are very, very traumatized.
The trauma associated with natural disasters can't be ignored. In the last decade, researchers studying those affected by earthquakes and tsunamis in Japan and Southeast Asia have found widespread incidents of PTSD and depression among survivors. And to provide any assistance, aid workers still need to reach affected areas. A small airport in the heavily affected town of Palu reopened several days ago, allowing small planes filled with aid workers or supplies to land. But even then, another journey still awaits.
The roads have been damaged. We have seen a lot of mud and landslides, which have made inland transport extremely challenging. So getting it the last miles out to people who actually need it is a massive problem at the moment.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. And folks, the French 77s are just divine. Please have one. All right. Weather from around the world always begins along the banks of the Rogue River, along the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon in the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit. Ooh, a little chilly. Yes, we're certainly into fall, and the colors are changing, and it is getting quite beautiful, as if it wasn't before. We will be much cooler than yesterday, with a high of 58, though tomorrow we're going to go up to about the mid-60s, and over the weekend maybe bouncing between the mid-60s and upper 60s. Though I got to tell you, it looks like we have rain in the forecast starting today and all weekend. It is cloudy at the moment, with the winds out of the east-northeast light and variable, about 1 to 2 miles per hour. And it will remain light and variable all day and overnight out of the east-northeast. And then in the morning tomorrow, we'll shift out of the west-northwest at its 5 to 10 mile per hour clip, as it usually is around here. And showers will continue. So it looks like we are expecting about 1/3 of an inch of rain today and about 1/2 of an inch of rain tomorrow or tonight. and then add on another 1/2 inch of rain tomorrow. So maybe I don't have to water my garden after all. It will be done for me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Now just put out all the last of the wildfires. That will be fabulous. Ragweed pollen remains high, though I would expect when the rain comes it would drop that stuff onto the ground. Let's hope. Air quality is good at 14, though I have to tell you, last night it was down to 4 parts per million, and it's gone up 10 parts. I think it's the reason being is that people are burning wood in their fireplaces. The daytime UV index is moderate at 4. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.1 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, though humidity is at 80%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 71 and partly cloudy. Paris is 75 and sunny. Oh, I want to go there. Rome is 74 and mostly cloudy, though I have to tell you they have a thunderstorm and electrical storm advisory in which critical infrastructure could be knocked out, and that usually is their electrical infrastructure and grid. So take care in Rome. Kiev is 56 and fair. Kabul is 61 and mostly cloudy. Well, I don't know if the wedding parties can still go out. The drones can fly pretty low under that cloud cover, so take care. Hong Kong is 75 and clear. Tokyo is 66 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 58 degrees with showers in the vicinity. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees and sunny. And New York is 63 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. Though, if you wanted to put it another way, you could say it's partly sunny because it's New York. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. I wanted to mention before I get into this article here by Eric Bollert out of Share Blue Media is that the results from my visitation with the orthopedic surgeon yesterday about my ankle shows that, well, it's just, severe wear and tear because I used to be a jock and I still, hobble around, and he could go in there and dig around and pull stuff out. But we may go ahead and mitigate that for a while with an occasional cortisone shot, which I did not get yesterday. And just knowing that it may be something I'm just going to live with for a while makes all the difference, doesn't it? Knowledge is power. Okay, well, why doesn't Team Trump want you to hear about why children are especially vulnerable to the effects of climate change? Because then they might be coerced into doing it, because there's no shaming them. They have no shame. And so what they've done is they've rejected language from the EPA warning that children are especially vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. The shameless move comes as Republicans across the country are working hard to undermine the overwhelming scientific consensus that climate change is real and man-made and that it will have catastrophic effects on human society. Reviewing the EPA's proposed language for a rule governing heat-trapped chemicals, the White House scrubbed key passages that made it clear children face an outsized danger from climate change. The EPA proposal itself was not exactly friendly to the environment. It cut back on an Obama-era EPA rule that was designed to reduce dangerous chemical leaks from air conditioning and refrigeration appliances because if a black guy did it, there must be something wrong with it. because we are the master race and we know better. The EPA proposal and the draft of that EPA proposal still contain text admitting that the dangers of climate change are especially acute for vulnerable populations. Like the elderly and the poor. Or, as the right wing like to say, fuck them, let them die. Well, this isn't the first time the Trump White House has cut language related to climate change from an EPA rule. Earlier this year, the White House scrubbed references to climate change from the agency's proposed replacement for the Clean Power Plan. And the EPA proposal stated that greenhouse gas emissions were worsening climate change and endangering public health. For years, Trump has promoted wild conspiracy theories that climate change is a hoax, and even claimed it was invented by the Chinese as a way to hinder U.S. manufacturing. And it looks like the Chinese are hacking our elections and not the Russians. Don't ever say the Russians are doing anything, even right now. Even the Russian spies are being busted for all sorts of nefarious deeds. It's the Chinese, because 1 million, 10 million, 1 billion microscopic Chinese could crawl all over America, and the next thing you know, chop suey.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Casey Michelle of Think Progress asked the question, who is responsible for the largest data breach, security breach in the history of Facebook? Well, nearly a week after that breach, Facebook announced that some 50 million accounts had been compromised as a hacker or potential multiple hackers accessed login credentials via the platform's View As feature. The breach also affected approximately 40 million other accounts who didn't directly use the View As feature, and there's still no indication of who was behind the hack or how the stolen information may eventually be used. And as the Wall Street Journal reported this week, Facebook executives briefed officials in Washington, including both lawmakers and members of the Department of Homeland Security, in the aftermath of the breach. However, there's no indication they revealed the identity of the hacker or that they even had any leads. Now, Carolyn Everson, the company's vice president of global marketing solutions, told the Wall Street Journal that the hackers were the equivalent of an odorless, weightless intruder that walked in, one only detectable when they made a certain move. Even without the identity revealed, though, the fallout from the massive breach has been swift and wide-ranging. This week, Facebook users learned that other platforms linked to their Facebook profiles, including Yelp and Spotify, most notably Yelp and Spotify, were vulnerable to hacking. The Guardian noted that the breach was a potential backdoor to thousands of third-party apps and websites. Thousands? I think it's a lot more than that. While the breach is the latest in a litany of data-related scandals embroiling the company over the past year, from fake Russian pages to data leaked by researchers tied to the scandal-plagued Cambridge Analytica firm. But where the company has taken a staggering reputational hit before, the financial costs are now starting to mount. Thanks to last week's breach, Facebook could face upwards of a $1.5 billion fine under the EU's new General Data Protection Regulation. And Iceland's Data Protection Commission separately announced that it would likely push for a formal investigation into the breach. Well, it couldn't have happened to a more, unconscious company. Wake up. Wake up, Mark. Come on. Wake up. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. Indeed, it's Friday. Oh, my. But Netroots Radio does broadcast on with the breaking news as it breaks. We will meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, all through the weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up with you on Monday in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.